Hello and welcome to R&R's Ask the Expert. I'm your host, Valerie King, R&R's editor-in-chief, and I'm joined today by Eric Sprague. He and Larry Wilberton are the brilliant minds behind Blue Collar Consulting, Morning Tech Meeting, and the Blue Collar Nation podcast. And it all began with restoration. So Eric started a home inspection business, Shamrock, in his garage in Utah back in 2006, which expanded to include air duct cleaning. And then he invited Larry, a college friend, actually his college roommate, to join him on just a job or two. But that became business partners. That was the situation it turned into. And they ended up moving to California, brought the business with them, weathered the Great Recession, moved into carpet cleaning, added on tile cleaning, also upholstery cleaning, and then finally property restoration. And I guess it's safe to say the rest is probably history. So today, they dedicate themselves to helping other blue collar owners, especially property restoration business leaders, not just survive, but thrive. And a key aspect of that, they learned from running their own restoration business, is thinking of and treating field technicians as assets. And that is why we're here to talk about. That's what we're here to talk about today. It was actually the focus of a presentation that Eric shared at the experience in Las Vegas in September. And as I sat in the audience, I absolutely knew I had to have them share their experience and thought leadership with the R&R audience. So here we are. I am thrilled to have Eric. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for the invite, Valerie. Much appreciated.
Yes, for sure. Okay, first thing is first, please help me get this story straight. I know there are a number of businesses and brands and hats being worn that I sort of alluded to in introducing you. So, can you clarify what each of your businesses today specializes in and the
Sure.
respective roles you play in them?
Sure. So Larry, my business partner, and I, we owned a business called Shamrock Cleaning and Restoration. And as you alluded to, we did all kinds of cleaning, residential and commercial, and then obviously property restoration. We sold that business 3 years ago. So sold the business, both took some time off, we were pretty worn out after doing it for a long time. And I called Larry one day out of the blue. I lived in Utah. Larry lived in California. And I actually commuted. Going to change what you had said just a slightly. I commuted from Utah to California every week for 12 years. Yeah,
Whoa.
I never moved. Larry lived in California. We moved the business down there, and I
Okay.
just flew back and forth every week.
Wow.
Some weeks I missed, but so yeah, so Larry and I, we'd gone our separate ways a little bit. And one of the things that had really accelerated our growth and made our lives a lot better was these morning meetings that we did with our staff. Now, everybody think it's called morningtechmeeting.com. So that's the business that we started right after, well, a year after we sold. And what it is it's video training for field technicians on the soft skills of the business. So there's a zillion schools in our world for getting technical training. They can go through IICRC and get WRT and ASD and all the things. And those are important, and everybody should get that. But, when you're sending technicians, a lot of them are young. They don't have a lot of life experience. And they're all of a sudden expected to go empathize with clients, maybe sell a loss, deal with adjusters that are going to show up on site, just deal with, multi-million-dollar homes, often, especially in Southern California where we were. And they're not prepared for that. And we realized that because as we looked at our business, we were having to put out fires all the time. And most restoration contractors are. So I started analyzing, like, well, where are the fires coming from? Like, what's the problem here, And almost inevitably, it was always a lack of life skills more than technical stuff. It wasn't that they did a flood cut wrong or placed equipment incorrectly. It was that they walked across the lawn 50 times and made a big path, or they blocked the homeowner in with their van in the driveway, or like those little things irritate people who in our world are already irritated because of the situation. So they take on greater significance than it would on a normal situation. So we started meeting every day, which Larry bucked me big time. He's like, we cannot afford to have 30 guys, 15 minutes a day, 5 minutes a day. I don't care how many minutes a day. And, I was like, look, we spend so much time going fixing the problem and money. Let's try to do this, and see what happens. Immediately, the callbacks went down. Add-on sales in our clean department went up. We were investing in these people and the skill, and they liked it because they felt more confident when they showed up at the door. They always felt confident technically, but now they felt like they could deal with the homeowner and be on more equal footing, I think. And it showed how much we cared about them, that we're investing in you as a person every day. So my long-winded story, I called up Larry and I was like, hey, I'm getting antsy. I'm getting bored. I can't sit around like this. This stinks. I have an idea to take the same lessons we did in our business and put them in video format in 5 to 7 minute videos that companies would get every single day, and have it for all trades: plumbing, HVAC, electrical, carpet cleaning, restoration. Because I had kind of tried it out on a beta with a couple friends I knew with companies, and it was working. And I'm like, well, if it works for them and it worked for us, then it will work for anybody. So that's business number one. So
that's Morning Tech Meeting.
morningtechmeeting.com.
Thank you. Okay.
Yep. So that's a video that goes out to either a company or straight to a technician's phone every day.
Okay.
5 days a week. And we are at something around 550 lessons.
Wow.
So far. So there's a lot. I mean, there's no repeats. I do a new one every single day. And then we started Blue Collar Consulting shortly after that, because what was happening was owners were calling us saying, hey, I like the videos. I need help for my managers. I need help from me. I need help for systems. I need help for so that's Blue Collar Consulting's my one-on-one coaching. And it's just a separate business from morningtechmeeting.com. And then we have the podcast. And the podcast, to be honest, is it's just a thing that Larry and I like to do. We talk like that every day anyway. And we thought it would be a really cool way to meet a lot of people, to be honest. And it has been. It's been the coolest thing. We've met so many neat people in the last 2 years. It's incredible. And Valerie, I mean, you're podcasting. Once you've spent an hour with somebody talking, you're friends for life. You might not meet them for another 5 years, but if somebody mentioned your name, they'd go, oh, I know Valerie. I was on, because you were on for an hour talking. Most people never get that in their life. So the Blue Collar Nation is it's a passion project for Larry and I, just something we like to do.
Very good. Thank you for sharing that backstory and the context and putting it all the pieces together, because even after attending your session and doing the research, I was like, wow, there's a few moving parts here. So appreciate it.
Maybe too many sometimes.
You guys are superhuman. But I love the idea of the passion project of the podcast, Blue Collar Nation podcast. And like you said, you're getting to know people, you're building relationships, you're learning, they're learning, but everybody else who listens is learning in the process. So it's just opening up that opportunity to others. I love it. All right. Yeah. So, okay. You talked a bit about this already, and I'd like to do more to build the foundation for our point of conversation here, which of course is treating field technicians as assets. So, if we take it back to your earlier days of owning and operating Shamrock, a cleaning and restoration business, maybe we can talk about the hardships you highlighted a bit during the session at the experience. Some challenges that you face that I'm sure plenty of other business owners, especially in restoration, share in. So, could you start by talking a bit about how business growth, that really stuck out for me, how the business growth came with real issues? Like, it was beautiful at first, even though it was just the two of you, but then you started growing and you found yourself, experiencing a few challenges and hurdles. So, what were some of those key challenges you faced as you scaled?
I think a lot of guys like Larry and I, or just people in general that start any trade, they start as technicians, not as business owners. And, Larry and I were very good at figuring out how to get the work done, how to make the people happy, keep the trucks clean. I'm a neat freak. So, and that was one of the things that we didn't have time in my talk to go over it, but I showed pictures of vans that were just filthy, rotten, dirty, and equipment that had just obviously been just chucked in the back. And for somebody like me, that's like the worst of the worst of the worst. Like, I mean, that drove me crazier than anything. I just couldn't get my head around why people all, I guess, all wouldn't be just like me and keep everything super neat and tidy, you know? So, you know, I had pain points with that. Larry had pain points with people not doing what they said they were going to do or what we asked them to do. So, you know, you can kind of keep it going when you have a couple trucks because you can show up quite a bit. But all of a sudden, as you start to get, you know, 5 trucks, 6 trucks, 7 trucks, 15, 20 people, you cannot show up at every job every day. And it's not even a good thing to do. You should be out creating more work and more systems and all that. And that's what happened to us. We were good at marketing. We were good at putting out fires. So when the guys would go mess stuff up in the early days, because we were not good managers or leaders and we weren't training them well. So, you know, they're going out every day going, well, I don't have any systems, so I guess I'll make up my own, right? I don't
Yeah.
have really any management, so I'll manage myself. And what that gets you is, you know, oftentimes, you know, nothing that you want as an owner. You're getting the opposite. So then what would Larry and I would do is run around behind them. That's why Larry runs around the show in a fireman's outfit. And, you know, we'd put out fires all day. Well, you can only do that for so long before your Yelp reviews start to take a tumble and customers disappear and all this stuff. And, you know, we just realized that also in all this chaos, nobody's happy. We weren't happy. They weren't happy. The customers were starting to become unhappy. And we were losing customers and not even knowing it. They were just ghosting us. You know, I'm talking
Yeah.
more about the cleaning side. You know,
Okay.
restoration, we'd get more work, but you could also lose referral sources because they're, you know, whoever referred is not happy. We don't really have that too much, but the watershed moment for Larry and I, Valerie, was Larry and I at night used to go ride our bikes around town to get some exercise and blow off some stress. And we had just grown so much. Like in 1 year, we went from like 220,000 to 1 million in like 9 months. I think it was like 9 months. Right. But the problem is that 1 million came in the door and 975,000 went blowing out the back door because we weren't efficient. You know, we were still running it like technicians. And we were on this bike ride in this very high end neighborhood. And you know, it's hilly where we were. And we were kind of, you know, riding slowly up these hills. And Larry just pointed and goes, we used to clean at that house. These are all multi-million-dollar homes. And we'd ride a few more feet because, you know what, we used to clean at that house too. And then it was starting to bother me. So that night I went on my computer and went, these people haven't used us in 2 years. They disappeared. That's on us. It's not on them. So we started to realize the silent killer of all these problems. And it was hard because we had been spending a lot of time blaming the people that worked for us. Oh, we can't get people. They're just a bunch of bums. They don't care. When in reality, we were doing a very poor job of managing and leading.
Oh my
So
goodness.
we had to eat some humble pie and fix it.
For sure. Okay, so what is that the moment or at least one of the key moments that you both said, "All right," cuz you talked about pointing the finger and I've heard throughout this, right? You're not saying we had sucky workers and it's all their fault. You keep saying leadership, management. So
Yep.
how like at what point how did you come to the realization and get so passionate about the idea that it's not them, it's you?
I started the business a little before Larry.
Okay.
And I remember I had left a corporate job and I'm like, okay, you know, I need to figure out what I wanted to do. And I kind of always wanted to have a service company. I always thought that'd be cool. And I remember I used to I had this living room couch that looked down over this valley. I had a house that sat way up high. And I'd look at the city lights and I would, in my mind, like dream up what my service business would look like, you know, and then here's why I started the service business. I wanted more time to ski and bike.
Love it. Yes.
That was my thing, right? It's still my thing to this day. The problem was I went like 8 years of the first 8 years of the business. I barely skied or biked the whole time because my business was a mess, And I remember thinking that the watershed moment for me was, wait a minute, we started this thing to make better lives for ourselves. And our lives have never been worse. Like we are a slave to this business. We don't get to do anything fun ever. We work 7 days a week. We work 15-hour days. We're always angry. We're always frustrated. And, we'd had so many people in and out of the business, and we lost many people who would have been awesome employees because we weren't awesome, But at the time, we were like, oh, that guy was a bum, and it's not true. So Larry and I we finally got to the point where we're the common denominator. It's us. And so we kind of didn't know what to do. We had a coach, Howard Partridge, who's very prominent in our industry, and Howard was great. But it took me going to John Maxwell's Leadership Academy or certification course. And that was a week long. And that was the moment that I changed, because Larry and I had different issues. Larry was not trusting of the staff. So instead of marketing, he'd run around all day and check on them. Well, what happens when you do that? Your sales go down because you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And he's not staying in his box in the org chart. He's running all muck in the org chart, right? So that was Larry's issue. My issue is that I'm super big picture. I'm very impatient. And I was so intense, everybody was afraid of me. So if anybody knows DISC personality profiling, I'm a very, very high D. So, the staff, I'd go in the warehouse and it would be like mice just going, I'm out of here. Eric's going to be on a roll if, we don't make this much money or do these many jobs. And so when I got to Maxwell, it all hit me like, oh man, I have problems. Larry has problems. And I remember I called Larry because it was just me that went, because Larry's job was to market, so I had to figure out operations first so that then Larry could go market more and feel comfortable doing so. And I remember I called Larry and I was just like, I was distraught. I actually think I was choking up on the phone. It was just like, I have messed this up big time.
Wow.
And I was like, I know you're not here, but when I come back, you're going to have to trust me because everything's going to change dramatically. And you're just going to have to please roll with it. And that's hard to do when you have two business partners and one all of a sudden has decided to go another direction. In
Great point.
What I realized was I had to change my role to basically becoming their life academy. And if I did that, they wouldn't leave and they'd do a way better job and be way more engaged. And I needed to make sure I had people in place to take the jobs that I was no longer going to be doing. Like in restoration, I used to look over every scope with a fine tooth comb and why didn't you bill this? And why didn't you bill that? And, and I was like, I need to let that go. I need to hire or train somebody that can just do that for me so I can invest the time with the people. So when I got back, and at first it was a flop. I came back and I took all the stuff that I learned at Maxwell and I was taking it almost verbatim and trying to just shove it down everybody's throat because I had learned so much. Yeah. I was like, this stuff's so great, and we've got all these people who don't even trust Larry and I. So all of a sudden I'm going to be Mr. Huggy Feely guy, and I'm talking like book talk, right? However you want to phrase that.
Yes.
More theoretical. And it was mutiny. So finally our general manager came in and he said, look, guys, Eric, you've got to stop this. You're freaking everybody out. People don't even want to come to work. We kind of get that you're trying to make it better, but this is not making it better. Cause I was like, everybody's going to have a cork board with their goals and everybody's going to be buying a house. And
Yes.
like I'm going all deep in, So I remember, he left and Larry and I shut the door in my office and I was deflated. I was so deflated because I felt that I was on to something. And all of a sudden I'm having our general manager go, nothing you're doing is helping. It's making it worse. And Larry kind of looked at me and he was like, you need to go home and figure this out because this is like, we've invested a lot in this. So I went for a bike ride. I'll never forget it. And I was like, why am I talking to them like this? Because I'm a technician at heart. I'm like, they're technicians. I need to take all the stuff I learned, but put it in their vernacular, tell stories and put it in a way that they can relate to. So I went in and, look, the hardest thing was getting them to just even trust us. Nothing we had done up to that point would lend itself to saying, I trust Eric and Larry because, every day was like, am I going to get yelled at today? Or, is today going to be chaos or, and you got to realize Larry and I were still like on trucks too. We were out in the field all day. A lot of times they'd work all day and we'd work all night, so yeah, it wasn't good. And so slowly we just started doing the morning meeting instead of having these big meetings. We were doing like 5 to 10 minute meetings every day. And Larry and I kept having these meetings where like, no matter what we say we're going to do, we have to do it. We have to follow through because if we don't, they'll know we're full of it. And it took a while. It took, I didn't know what I was doing. So let's say it took 6 months to get most of the people to buy in. I think now, if I could do it again, I could drastically shorten that. But at the time, I didn't really know what to do. And look, a lot of that was just gaining trust, So like, let me give you an example. Whereas before, if I showed up on a job site and there's a half a dozen guys there, what am I doing? I'm just going to look for everything that I didn't like. And I'm not talking about the things that I do like. I'm talking about like, why'd you park here? Why is there a mess here? How come there's not an air scrubber on this job? It was just like, I'd show up and you could just feel it. They'd be like, oh, we're going to, tailgate meeting guys. All right. You guys did all this stuff wrong. So, I just show up and I'd have like a cooler full of Gatorades and waters and I would go still look around. I mean, you have to inspect, but we'd have a little powwow and this time it wouldn't be anything like that. I'd be like, here's the Gatorades, here's the waters. And then, I would start with, all the things that I liked this time.
Okay.
Like, I love that you guys are working together. I love that you guys are really ahead of schedule. I love this. Here's a couple things I think we could probably work on. Do you guys think about putting an air scrubber on this job? Because I think we're going to probably create more dust than we like. And then that changes the tone of it, right? So after I do that several times, now when I show up on a job, they weren't nervous anymore, right? I mean, it sounds so basic, right?
Yep.
But when you're so in your business and the stakes are so high, it's everything you've ever invested is all in that business. You don't take anything lightly. But you know what? As I started to do this, the more I poured into them, the nicer I was, the more systems I built to make their day easier. The engagement just started going up and up and up and up to the point where I hired, now we were making like a lot more money too, right? Because we weren't our top line looked the same, but our bottom line looked way different because we weren't putting out fires and doing redos and the carpet cleaners are doing add-on sales. Like our margins just kept getting better and better. So I got to the point where I was like, this is my full-time job. My full-time job, unless there's like a big problem technically or business-wise, my job is to pour into them. And I know most owners, like the things I say, Valerie, are not popular. Most guys do not want to hear what I have to say. And I would have been the same person had I not done it and seen the results. When I talk about this stuff, people, guys, because look, who's an owner in our industry? Usually some middle-aged guy like me, right? And they're like looking at me like I've got three heads.
Wow. So, well, that's one thing I appreciate. You say that. I appreciate that you putting this into practice, right? Like you've had such success, but I appreciate that you shared even that. Even once you had that like turning point in your mind and heart about being a different kind of owner and leader and investing completely differently in your employees, the minute you tried to put it into practice, even that had to be refined and you had to do some learning and growth there. So, it's like I just keep hearing patience, patience, patience through the lens of you as the leader. I'm assuming too, right? Your personality. You want people to do things a certain way and to kind of like change the order of how you even speak to them when I'm sure at first you were probably like, "Oh my gosh, this is hard. I want to point out, I want to point out that this shirt piece of equipment should be here." Or so like what was that like? Just personally,
Well,
personality-wise challenging yourself, being patient, putting it into action. You knew what you're supposed to do, but
no, it's hard. Look, I'm not a patient person, and and I'm much more patient now, but that took a while. And the thing that was the hardest for me was I am like 100% task driven. I am task, 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 task. If you look at my disc profile, it's all task. And I can very easily overlook the people in it. People do these tasks. Like I want tasks done, but I have to make a connection with the people doing the task to get them to want to do the task, right? And do it well. So I'm going to give you an example that I do not like to say, but so I had an assistant and her desk was right in front of the door to my office. And like she was great. I worked with her every day for many, many, many years. She was super helpful to me in every way. Great employee. And but the thing was, I'd get up a couple hours before work would start, and I would be sitting at my kitchen table with a laptop, just grind. I'd have a list of all the things I wanted to do that day, and I wanted to go, kill it and win the day, and I would hit that front door of our shop like a tornado. Like I've already ramped up 2 hours ago. I don't even drink coffee. I'm just like ready to go. So after a while of doing this, kind of the new Eric, where people were,
mhm.
I was starting as I was doing it because now they're feeling open to tell me things like, "Oh, boss, I used to be totally petrified of you." Like
Right.
you're just so intense. And I remember I stopped at, and her name was Tiffany. I stopped and I said, "Tiffany, do I say good morning to you when I come in?" Because I was starting to like become more aware. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Not once in 6 years, 0 days in 6 years did I say good morning." Like she's like, "I always just chalked it up to I knew that you were like on go mode, but I would have preferred you to say good morning." So, and I made a promise to her that day. I said, "I will never walk in this door without saying good morning to you and spending a couple minutes and finding out how your evening went." Like those were big changes for me, Valerie.
That's such a huge example. I appreciate that. For sure.
Yeah. So, people, when I get up on stage, like at the experience, I could see some of the kind of old crusty guys that are kind of like me with the crossed arms going, "This is a bunch of BS. I don't know what Eric's going on and on about." I was them and it wasn't working. And right after the talk that I gave, that you attended, I had
Yes.
people out in the hallway coming up going, "That's my company." I'm like, "Well, here's my card."
Right,
I mean,
right.
like, I know what it's like. I know. And look, going to work angry and frustrated every day is no way to live. But how many people do it in our industry? How many people do it in every industry? you know it's people. Like it took me a long time to learn that it's not tasks. Peter Drucker, the famous management guru, culture eats strategy for lunch. That's his famous saying. And I didn't know the saying at the time, but having lived it, it's so true. Like, I want to get like shirts that say like, my culture will kick your strategy's ass or
Yes.
something,
Yes.
because based on Peter Drucker's culture comment or quote, I had to do that like 5 years ago because Amazon dropped a whole bunch of warehouses right near where Larry and my business was, like 6 warehouses, because where our business was is basically at the intersection of the 10 and the 15 freeways. So that means that stuff comes in from the port of Los Angeles from China and then it's getting moved all across the United States we're a trucking hub. And I lost all of my entry level labor. Like they just went, I want to go work for Amazon. So Larry and I had to get really creative with, what we're talking about now to get people to come to work for us, but then keep them. And my point about the culture thing in Drucker's comment is I had far less skilled and experienced people in the later years than I did early on. A lot of the people, when we were having all the problems, they had been at other restoration companies. They had 5 or 10 years of experience and having all these problems. Now I'm hiring 18-year-old kids, like kind of like McDonald's does, right? But I'm plopping them into this system of personal development and culture, and they were outperforming my people from the years in the previous with all the experience.
My goodness. That's powerful. Hugely
Yeah.
powerful. Okay. So to simplify this, you could argue oversimplify, but just to back this up for us, you spoke to what you consider the two biggest threats to any service business. What are those and why? You've consistently alluded to it. So just to put those two pieces together, what are the two biggest threats to any service
Yeah.
business and
I
why
think the
in your
biggest
opinion?
in 2021, going into 22, the two biggest threats are number one, attracting and retaining talent, because every market has a finite amount of people that would come do the type of job that we have. So I'm competing against every other trade and every other restoration and cleaning company for that same talent. When I say talent, I'm talking people that probably don't have any talent yet. Like we're just trying to get somebody in the door. So attracting and retaining is a huge threat. At the experience, so many people were telling me, like, yeah, I've got 5 vans and there's only one running because I can't get anybody to run the other 4. I mean, can you imagine what that does to your business? But then the other one, and I talked about it at a fair amount of length, is the statistics say that conservatively 70% of employees are disengaged, meaning they just kind of show up and collect a paycheck. It's not that they're not working at all, but they're not working very hard and they're not very, thinking about the job and as a career. 20% of the people are doing, trying their best, doing a great job. And then 10% are actively disengaged, meaning they're trying to ruin your business. Like they're trying to take the other 9 people down with them on a team of 10. And, I use that in the talk because, excuse me, I think a team of 10 in our industry is pretty common size. So imagine that I've got a team of 10, 7 of them could care less about what we do. 2 of them really care. And one guy hates it so much and hates me so much. He's trying to take those 7 that are teetering down with them. And, when I'm talking to my clients, because, I finished with, the idea that culture is a game of degree, not a game of perfection. What if I can take the 7 disengaged and bring that down to only 4? All of a sudden I'm killing everybody, because if they have the same problem I do, and I can get my disengagement as low as possible to 3 out of 10 or 4 out of 10, I'm way ahead of the game, and to be honest, in our industry, people stay like, I mean, I don't know, you probably know this better than I do. Average water technician, 18 months? Is that probably about right? I don't know. Like
I'm
Most
not sure.
places will keep a water tech 12 to 18 months at most. The job's hard. You're crawling around in sewage and you're getting woken up at 2 a.m. And, eventually they go, this stinks. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to go work at Amazon. Whereas if you have a culture where you're preaching how much good we're doing in the world, how many people we're helping, how important they are to everybody's comfort in life, and you give them a bigger purpose. And look, that doesn't happen overnight either. They stay way longer than that. I was keeping water techs for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. I mean, I'm not saying that never happens anywhere, but I was keeping a
Right.
lot of people that long.
Yeah, that's impressive. Okay, so you've talked about the morning meetings. You've talked about being a different kind of a leader. I'm curious if you could kind of package it up for us. This whole idea of culture, the importance of that culture in attracting and retaining talent. If I'm a restoration industry or if I'm a restoration contractor, business owner, leader listening to this, what's the highlight reel, if you will, the key ingredients, I guess, that fellow restoration business owners can take note of in terms of bringing this culture you're talking about to life?
All right, this is not going to be popular either.
Okay, here we go, guys.
Well, the first thing is they have to work on themselves. They have to look in the mirror and take ownership of where they're at. So if they're unhappy or they think all their employees stink or whatever it may be, you have to take a really deep look inward and say, am I sure that's not me? Or to what degree do I participate and create this environment? And, the next thing would be to go get help, whether it's get a coach, whether it's go to John Maxwell training or something similar to that, right? I think the next thing, so that's number one, the leader has to make a concerted effort to change their ways, or they're just going to keep getting the result that they've been getting. It doesn't make any sense. The second thing is a lot of, maybe not I'm not talking the bigger franchises that may have, 100 guys and all that, but a lot of, especially independents, that they don't have systems. They don't have business systems in place. They don't have, this is how we do things every day. This is how you run a water call. This is how you sell a job. This is how you stock your truck. This is how you empty your truck. They don't have that. So if you don't have systems in place, it's everybody's making their own, right? So you could have a room full of people, everybody's doing it differently. That means every client's getting a different experience. And it means that it's very stressful for the people that work there because they don't know if they're really doing stuff right or not. They're always wondering, like, well, Eric and Larry think this is okay. I think I'm doing okay. And then next thing you know, Larry, I show up and go, what are you doing? So, in the early days, we didn't have a lot of systems. So I would say, look inward, build systems. And then here's the big thing. It's like, you have to commit to them. And that's not easy to do, right? You're going, I'm already busy. I'm already stressed about money. I'm already stressed about where this industry is going, like getting claims pushed through or, the right amount of money for it or all the things that we all worry about. But so many things are fixed if you fix your people and how you engage with them. And here's the thing, you have to give them time and attention. I mean, Zig Ziglar always said that in the eyes of a kid, they spell love Time. Right. Well, they're not your kids, but they're still like one of the biggest reasons millennials leave a job is because they feel no connection to the leader. So I'm going to have to spend my time connecting and that I don't want to be long-winded about this, but millennials and Generation Z, that's who our workforce is. They have a different way of viewing the world. They have a different set of values that if we cannot, as the older owners, align with those and make it palatable for them to want to work for us, they will not. They will go elsewhere. And I'm not saying like I have all the answers to that. That's a whole thing. But I had an entire building full of millennials. And, everybody be like, oh, millennials are the worst. They this and that and the other. And I know, Valerie, that you're a millennial. And the thing is that Larry and I, once we made our changes to show purpose and why we do this, and they want to know why, and they want to have some independence, and they want to feel like they're being part of the solution. Our team was amazing. I mean, they would work so hard, and I think it's also a misnomer because I'm Generation X, but I'm like like a geriatric X. I'm like a year off the boomer. Like I'm very close to being a baby boomer. So I come from that generation. Look, there were people who were super lazy, didn't want to work, and all the same things that everybody complains about millennials. I can remember about them. They were saying that about us, right? I don't believe that. I believe people will work if you give them something to work towards.
I love that. Personally, and in light of the restoration industry, I think it's helpful because there really is a lot of research out there that puts data points to what you just said. But to hear from you, who, you were a restoration business owner, having a really hard time with the people you employed, to know there were so many millennials working under you, and that completely switched whenever you put these practices into place, that's something for us all to take note of and really hear out. Like you lived this and you turned it around with a big bunch of millennials even. So so
Ever,
there's something here.
I don't think there was one non-millennial working for us.
Okay, listeners, that speaks volumes, y'all.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm curious. There's the morning meeting. There's Actually, I'm curious. So, in thinking about ways that you engage your employees, kind of ideas, you talked about there being a whole system, not just a few things, not just one thing. For example, taking people out to lunch or dinner or throwing parties. You even talked about, like a little bit earlier, feedback and making sure they understand where they stand and how you feel about their performance. Can you kind of
It's
give us
huge.
maybe a short list? I guess in that case, not the whole system, but just a short list of what that
Yeah.
system is to give us our listeners an idea of what you're talking here when you speak engagement.
Yeah. Well, when I speak engagement, I think there's a rhythm to it. There's a rhythm to a good business has a rhythm. Everybody comes in every day and everything's kind of the same. Most people like that stability. Simon Sinek talks about that all the time, and start with why. They want to feel secure and stable. So Larry and I were very intentional about the rhythm of our business that we hadn't been earlier. Every day was chaos. So it started with that morning meeting. That morning meeting was quick. We had a one big one on Monday, and then we had like a 5 to 10 minute one every day, but we never missed. They knew that we come in from 7 to 7:30. We got our vans ready. There's a checklist for every van. Somebody's going to check my van to make sure I'm okay. Then I'm going to head into the morning meeting. Then I'm going to go. Right. And as they got to do that over and over and over, there's comfort in that. And then, you know, my thing was, instead of going out and, checking on jobs and grinding on guys, I was going out and making sure that they were happy. And then at the end of the day, I know it depends on the size of the business and who you are, but I loved to be at the warehouse. I would make sure that I was back at the shop at 4, because I would stand out in the shop and wait for the vans to start rolling in. And I'd give them a high five, and I would, help them take the trash out. And I'd ask them how their day was, because look, I had been a technician. You're stuck in LA traffic. A customer is terrible to you. You just need somebody to vent to. And when the boss comes and says, "How did it go today?" Like, "Oh, can I just vent for 5 minutes?" That's connecting time. And then the next van would roll in and I do the same thing. So from like 4 to 6 every day, I'd be out there just unloading trash, helping them clean, just a little for each van and each crew. And, I know that's a lot of time, but that was the best time I spent every single day. Right. Because they're just like, who else's boss is out there helping them, carry granite countertops out to the dumpster, So that, and then the feedback. So they're getting, I don't like the word love, but I'm loving on them, every
Mm-hmm.
day a little bit. And then every 30 days, we do what we call the quick review. And this is crucial, especially millennials and Gen Z. They're used to getting a lot of feedback in school. Like my generation, not so much. You just got a report card, 4 times a year or twice a year. I don't even remember. And it was either good or bad. Whereas we started doing a 30-day review I could do on like 5 minutes. I usually would bring them out and just do them on the tailgate of the truck at a job site. So it wasn't like this big, huge deal. Because, if you wait too long to tell somebody they're doing poorly, that just gets worse and worse and worse. And then by the time you get there, there's so much animosity on both parts and they're so far afield, you'll never get them back to where you want them to be. Whereas if you start doing these 30-day reviews and, um, they have to be, I would always start with these are the things that I'm really liking. These are the things that need work. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate you, so I'll change the language, but it's called the poop sandwich. You give them the bread, you give them the poop, and then you give them the bread again.
I
and
love it.
the thing is that after a few months, they're not making many mistakes anymore because you're working on them consistently. So they're kind of looking forward to the quick review because they're getting that feedback and it's usually positive at that point. And I made the point in my talk, if all of a sudden you had a high performer going downhill, that's your chance to go, okay, what's going on? Is everything okay at home? Is your health okay? Like what? Something's up, dude,
Yes.
because I know you and you don't normally do these things. And all of a sudden, you're like, yeah, I'm getting a divorce. Or like that's when those are the moments almost where it was the most important time because somebody was acknowledging to them, like, I know you're not this person and I see this, what's going on. Right. The quick review is huge. And, in that way, like a lot of owners don't like to do reviews because they just do them once a year and they're going, that guy's going to hit me up for a
Mhm.
raise,
Right.
right. And
Yes.
they're
Thank
like,
you.
so if I just avoid the review, I won't have to spend any more money. Whereas nobody's expecting a raise every single time you meet every 30 days.
There you go.
It's more of a chance just to give them feedback. And, after a while, it gets kind of easy because there's not much feedback to give other than, hey, keep up the good work. And everybody likes a pat on the back. I don't care who, I don't care. You could be the crustiest, most, non-people person in the world.
Yes.
They still like to hear that they're doing a good job.
That makes so much sense. And it truly just sounds and feels so much less stressful for both sides. If I'm the owner and leader and if I am the on the receiving end of this feedback as the employee, like, okay, it's only been a month. We talked last time. Hopefully there can't be that much that's changed or that I'm failing on or, of concern. And to your point, this whole idea of things popping up about personal life and struggles that you can help support. I mean, the whole connection thing is it's powerful.
And you're building social capital.
There we
So
go.
let me
Okay.
give you an example. So look, I'm of Irish descent. I have a fiery temper. At times, I do my very best to keep it under control. But if I spend all this time every day, I'm unloading vans with these guys. I say guys because most of the people in the field were men, but it's just the same for the office staff as well, right? If I'm spending time with them and I'm reviewing them and I'm telling them how much I appreciate them, if I have an event that triggers me and I get angrier than I normally would, they know that I care about them so much. They're not going to be like, that guy's a huge jerk. They'll be like, Eric had a bad moment. Because I used to see that with Larry, and it wasn't fair because Larry was out marketing all day, every day. So Larry, he tried his best, but he just wasn't around like I was. He was out there, kissing babies and shaking hands and getting work.
Yep.
So if he had a bad day, they would be much more affected by that than if I had a bad day
That
because
makes
I
sense.
had built that social capital. My guess would be that many, 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 many owners don't have much social capital with their people.
Social capital. I love that. Okay, so yes, looking back at you owners, turning it back to that lens, second to last question. The theme of this has been investing in yourself first as the leader and then the employees, of course. So, in starting with yourself as the leader, the owner, I'm curious what some of the top resources you found inspiration in education in have been because it's a theme here. You keep referring to trainings and books and authors and yeah, I'd love to hear your short list of resources.
The list is not short.
That does
but
not surprise me.
yeah, I'll tell you, I had to learn. I mean, I was not a good student in high school. I barely made it out, to be honest. I went to college. I majored in weightlifting and partying, sprinkled a little education on top with Larry. And, so I can't say that I was like a super awesome student. I was always like fairly intelligent. I just didn't really like sitting at a desk all day, and the light bulb turned on for me when I realized that I was not going to have the life that I wanted for me if I did not help, if I didn't up my game and get better so I could help other people have the life that they wanted. Right. So I took this really seriously after that Maxwell training. I mean, that was a watershed moment for me personally. I came back and I was like, books, podcasts, nonsense. I used to do weekends where I wouldn't go home and I would listen to like 14 podcasts and read 2 books. And I would just like, this was my 3-day, like I'd make it like I'd take Friday off and I'd sequester myself at my place in California and I just would not come out. Like I would go
Wow.
like, yeah, because I'm like, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do it all the way. So
Wow.
I'll give you I'll give you a smattering of the most important
Please.
ones to me.
Please a smattering.
For the most important book for me was The E-Myth by Michael Gerber.
Ooh.
Because without systems in place, I couldn't do any of the other cool things that I wanted to do for everybody because I felt that they needed to have that stability. They needed to
Okay.
know how to do their job. And my customers needed everybody to do it the same way, especially on the carpet cleaning side, because, you could go one year and then I could go the next and Larry could go the year after that. They want to see that all 3 years it was done the same way. If I do one thing and you do something totally different, they're like, I don't know how I feel about this company,
Yeah.
So E-Myth was huge.
Okay.
Larry and I saw Michael Gerber speak twice,
Nice.
and he's interesting guy. And I'll never forget, he said, we were sitting in the front row and he got up and, there's probably 400 or 500 people in the audience. And he said, how many people here are entrepreneur? And everybody raised their hand, you proud. And I won't repeat it, but he was like, BS. If I showed up at your office, you'd be there. And that's not an entrepreneur. You would have put the systems in place. He's like, if I show up at a McDonald's and ask to speak to the owner, they don't even know who the owner is. And everybody's hand just slowly went down, but that really struck me. I need systems so that if I want my dream life, which was to go ski and bike, then I had to build systems so that they knew what they were doing.
Very good.
Okay. So that's my number one. My number 2 is John Maxwell's Leadership Gold.
Okay.
It's like one of his least popular books, I think,
Mm-hmm.
ironically, because he's written like 75 books. But I think for the trades or for any kind of service business, it's like 26 little leadership lessons. And what we used to do was, as we were growing, we would have in-house mastermind groups about Leadership Gold, where every week we do 2 chapters at night after to see who we were trying to train anybody that was interested in maybe becoming a field supervisor or a manager. Well, before you even got a chance at that, you had to go through our mastermind that I would lead through this book. And halfway through, a lot of guys would be like, oh, that's too much responsibility. I don't want to do that. Perfect. Great. Go back to your van. It's all good. I mean, that way I didn't lose you, because I'm actually going to bring this class out soon, because what happens all the time in our world is, oh, Valerie's my best technician. So Valerie's now going to be over all technicians. And you have no leadership skills. You might not even be wired for leadership, right? So all of a sudden, what did that do? I took my best technician off a truck, and now she's underperforming because I've not trained or just, deciphered whether she's even capable of doing this job. So then she doesn't like the job. You don't like the job because you don't feel like you're winning anymore. The other guys don't like it either because they don't think you're any good at it. And I lost my best technician, and now everybody's upset. Right. So leadership gold was very important so that we wouldn't make that mistake over and over, because I lost very good technicians because I tried to force them into management positions. Happens all the time. I have a book, and I know there's a video, but
Yes,
I pulled this out.
please.
This, I don't know anybody else other than me that's ever read.
Never heard
I
of
may
it.
have the
Never
only
heard of it.
copy. It's called Leadership Secrets of Attila the Hun by Wes Roberts, PhD. This is one of the best leadership books I've ever read.
Wow.
It's just a tiny little book,
Love it.
and it is unreal. So that's my hidden gem.
Thank you.
And then the last one would be the One Thing by Gary Keller.
I am such a fan too. Yes.
And then a book that I read after, I wish so much I had read this when we were still in business. Matthew Kelly, The Dream Manager.
Never heard of that one.
Oh,
Why that one?
Okay. So The Dream Manager is based on a true story
Okay.
of a janitorial company in the Midwest that had over 400% turnover. Okay. So think about that. Every position, they're getting 4 people for that per year. Can you imagine what that would do? And they're losing customers, and their whole life is drama. And they're figuring, well, that's just janitorial. We have mainly, low end or immigrant population workers. This is just how it is, So the owner said, hey, let's just give everybody a $2 raise. That'll keep them. And it didn't, right? Yeah. So what they did was, the first thing they did is they surveyed the company. Why did you leave? Or why did the people that you used to work with leave? And they came to find out that because they worked at night, a lot of the people lived in not great neighborhoods and were afraid to go home.
Wow.
So they started a shuttle where they would drive the people straight to their door after work. They cut their turnover in half just by that one move. So then that made them say, well, what else could we do? And then they realized that, it isn't only the owner and the managers that have life dreams, it's the people that work there too. So they hired a dream manager, somebody that could help the people achieve their dreams. And that dream might have been at some point them moving out of there and into another company. And they're like totally good with that. And they went from having 400% plus turnover. Within a few years, they were having a waiting list to work there. That's one of the best books on management I've ever read.
Beautiful. And it sounds like such a great case study in creating a culture, just starting within. And that almost in and of itself takes care of attracting. It takes a minute, but people want to work for you, right?
Well, the funny thing about that book, I had been at a conference when we were terrible, and the guy who started the Dream Manager was the keynote speaker, but it just didn't resonate with me at the time. I wasn't there. I was on, well, when's the marketing guy going to get up so we can get bigger, And I bought the book while I was there and never read it until only fairly recently. And I'm like, my whole thing could have changed if I just read that book then. But, I wasn't ready then.
Yep.
So
I've had that experience too, where you read a book and you're like, oh my gosh, if I would have read this 5 years earlier, my whole life would be different.
But you might not have been ready. So then the next podcasts, I have a whole bunch, but I listened to, it's no longer on. He stopped it and started a new podcast, but it was called the MFCEO Project. The guy's name is Andy Frisella. He owns a huge supplement company, but this is not for the faint of heart. The MF stands for exactly what you think it would. So if you don't like profanity, do not listen to this show, but it's literally a master class in business. Like, it was really good. So I really enjoyed that. There's another one called Masters of Scale. It's by Reid Hoffman. He helped start PayPal, and he has a very amazing Rolodex of guests, so, and they talk about scaling businesses, and I'm interested in that, so I listen to Masters of Scale. And then there's another one called the Rich Roll podcast. Rich Roll had been an attorney who had overcome alcoholism and drug abuse, hated being an attorney, stopped being an attorney, and basically became like an ultra endurance athlete, vegan guy, right? But yeah, he's like, he has this quality. He's Ivy League educated, whole thing. And then he's had all the alcoholism and all that on. So he's got the life experience and the educational background, but he's an amazing interviewer. And it's almost all about becoming a better you.
Nice.
Not everybody. This is not for everybody. Like
Okay.
you have to really be into your personal journey to probably like some of the stuff.
You gotta be a self-help nerd, guys.
Yeah, on that one you do, but
Okay.
he's helped me a lot.
That's awesome.
And then in the trades, I have two that I listen to. I listen to Toolbox for the Trades, which is the podcast for Service Titan. I don't know if you're familiar with Service Titan.
No.
Service Titan is CRM for basically plumbing, HVAC, and electrical. Awesome. And now they're heading into like landscaping. And to my knowledge, I think they're going to come at some point. They have their eyes set on restoration too. We've been on their podcast. I have a lot of plumbing and HVAC clients, so I got familiar with Service Titan. They're a $10 billion market cap.
All right.
They're huge. So they have a good podcast. They hired a professional comedian to be the host, and she's really good. And she's really, really good. So Toolbox for the Trades is good. And then there's another one called To the Point, and the guy's name is Chris Yano. He owns a very large marketing company for the trades out in Phoenix. And he's just a huge personality. And
nice.
Larry and I are trying to be him someday. No, he's a friend, he's a good guy. So I listen to those. And then as far as like groups, I was, Howard Partridge was my mentor for years and years, and now we're more friends than mentor, but I still go to him for help when I need it, when I want to grow. And then the John Maxwell stuff, I'm still pretty involved in that. So I mean, look, I've got like 50 other podcasts and a lot of books, but that was the only thing that was going to turn the corner for me, Valerie. I had to learn.
Thank you so much for sharing that. It makes all the more difference, though, to know you weren't like a student growing up, and that wasn't who you identified as, and you weren't this crazy nerdy learner that loved to take in information from books and podcasts until things happened, and here you are. So it kind of makes it resonate more that
I was rough. I was at the bar. I hadn't read a book and I couldn't even tell you the last book I had read before all of this.
Thank you.
I mean, I was the anti, and I was the guy that figured I got all this figured out.
Yes.
And I did not.
I appreciate your story and you grounding yourself and taking us back to those moments throughout this interview of challenge and like reminding us you're only human. Everything was not perfect, but you did find help and solution. And then again, though, it's what's that saying you said? It's not a situation of perfection. It's a saying that you shared.
Well, I always say that culture is a game of degree, not a game of perfection.
Yes.
And can I make one last point? I know we've been going on and on, but I was guilty of this. Larry was guilty of this. One of the biggest roadblocks to having a better life or a better culture or a more enjoyable business, however you want to put it, a lot of owners have a lot of ego. And I certainly have plenty of ego to go around. And I've made it my life's mission in the last 5 years to try to check my ego consistently. But that's what's keeping so many people from really getting what they want to get what they want, and they don't know how to get it. The first thing is that you got to check your ego at the door. Because look, to start a restoration company takes a massive ego. You have to any business, you have to be an egomaniac to start, to think like, if you just look at the statistics and say, well, I'm going to go start my own business from scratch with, no help. I mean, that takes a lot of ego. But the problem is that same skill set of ego and by the bootstraps and I'll do everything myself and all that, that only works for startup. Then you have to become a leader and a manager and caring and, all these other things that, completely are the antithesis of what got you going. It's a hard transition for many.
Oh, that just tied it all up in a bow. I love that. Ego, guys. Ego. Wow. Okay. So is that it? My last question was going to be, if I'm a restoration business owner, I'm looking to reinvigorate my business and drive growth by more meaningfully investing in my field technicians. Is that my step?
Ego,
High
ego,
level ego, check my ego.
check your ego and start working on yourself, and then get help. Get help for the parts that, to actually make all the changes, whether it's me or Howard Partridge or somebody else. Get somebody that's been doing it. But, I have people that will contact me for coaching, and there are hard conversations. I'm like, you're nowhere near ready. You're going to waste your money with me. You need to work on yourself first, because you're not going to let, like, I had a meeting about a guy who's having massive culture problems. He has a huge company, plumbing company, very, very large. He's got 75 vans. Yeah, I mean, he's
Oh,
big, and it's happened very quickly.
okay.
And he's not there. As we sat down, he's just not there. So I just sent him a copy of the Dream Manager and said, call me when you're ready.
Uh,
Read this book and call me when you're ready. You're not ready. If I hadn't reached enough pain, I wouldn't have been ready. So yeah, you have to get there first. That's the first step.
Thank you so much. This has been so powerful. I appreciate the interview, Eric.
Thank you for the
There's
time.
just so much in here, and it's rooted in your story of struggle. It's not just you're not just a coach. You came from a background in this, and you felt the feelings and the hardships that many listening, I'm sure, are feeling right now.
Yeah, I think the best coaches are usually the guys who had to go figure it out the hard way.
I could not agree more, truly. All right.
Yeah.
So, before we go, where can our listeners go to connect with you or learn more about Morning Tech Meeting or Blue Collar Consulting? Also the podcast.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll start with that
Yeah.
podcast. Anywhere podcasts are found, it's called Blue Collar Nation Podcast. We have an episode that comes out every Thursday for all trades, and then we sprinkle some, because of our background, we do more restoration content than anything else. So like on Tuesdays, sometimes we'll throw some restoration stuff out too. So we at least have one a week, if not two. Although we did I think we did 14 and 15 days leading up to the experience. Yeah, well, we were trying to, get people there and have our friends on, and, so there's that. And then Blue Collar Consulting, you can do all of this through the morningtechmeeting.com website. So, if you want to get a hold of me for any coaching, it's just morningtechmeeting.com. And then all of our contact information is there. And then the one thing, though, that I would like to talk about, where Bruce Deloach, who's an IICRC instructor, and a lot of people listening probably send their people to Bruce for, technical training for their people. Bruce and I are both super passionate about this. I basically talked Bruce into doing this with me. I begged him, because we're friends, because he's so busy with classes. But, my point to him was like, yeah, but you used to have a business, and Bruce went through a very similar journey to Larry and I, so we're really passionate about this topic of changing people's cultures. So we started on the first day, we had a panel discussion with Larry, Bruce, and I called the Prophets of Profit. And, and the reason we called it that is because a lot of owners are like, you guys are talking about all this new age feelings stuff, and I'm not into it. But the reality is that companies that do these things tend to be more profitable, and they tend to be better, and they tend to get bigger because, the system works. So we don't know exactly the schedule, but we're going to be doing a class every 4 to 8 weeks, and about building the culture, and we'll go way deeper than you and I could today. It's an 8-hour class. So they can go to morningtechmeeting.com/Bruce to find out whatever the next class is going to be. That'll be
Thank
ongoing.
you. Very good. All right, take note,
That's it.
listeners. No shortage of resources here. We've got a book list, we've got a podcast list, we've got groups, we have a training that's going to be offered regularly. Yeah, I hope you've taken note. All right, well, that is it. For more insights on restoration, remediation, and the people behind it all, visit our website, rnrmagonline.com, Apple or Spotify. If you haven't yet, please be sure to follow the podcast to keep up with our latest episodes. And if you could give us a quick review and rating, we would so appreciate it. We're also on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, so we invite you to follow us there too. This has been R&R's Ask the Expert. Thank you for listening.